All right, great. So you're able to see the PPT, I hope. And just to kind of get started, you all understand how the tool works. So let's just get comfortable. So those who attended it a couple of weeks ago, you probably know how it works. So I have Srinath, who just typed into the chat message with a yes. Thank you, Srinath. So if you can just we'll just take 2 minutes quick. Let's just figure out what is around, and then we'll get into, we'll deep dive into sentence correction. That's the agenda for today. I hope all of you are aware of it. Okay. So I hope, so why don't you just go ahead and let's do this. I think even before I get into the chat, let me give you a poll. So how many of you have finished seeing the sentence correction videos? That's the concept and the applications. All right, great. So we have some who have seen it fully. Very good. But there are some who have seen a large part but have left a little bit. That's okay. There are some who have made some progress, which is also good. And the people who have not done anything at all, I'm not very sure whether you would be able to follow me, but please stay in the session today. But I'm not very sure whether you're going to follow me. And just to kind of set things, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to give you an overview of sentence correction, but I'm also going to be giving you some questions to solve, right? And we will kind of use some tougher questions just to see, what can GMAT possibly do, correct? Like, what is the worst case scenario? How would, right, a really tough question look? And do we have enough arsenal? Do we have enough firepower, so to speak, that we can, we can look at any kind of question and we should be able to get to the answer, right? That's what we want. So great. Now that I know this, but those who have not done nothing at all, I just want to ask you one thing, which is, like, why would you like not do it, right? And please use the chat window. Please use the chat window. And I just wanted to know what has been your experience with sentence correction. How has it gone? I'm going to give you another question. So more in terms of comfort, how comfortable are you with sentence correction? Yeah, okay. And for this, and for the people who have not seen the videos, obviously it's going to be not applicable, but still go ahead. What is your perception, correct? So it may even be your perception of what you think is sentence correction. So very good. I was so sure that nobody is going to pick 10, right? See, it's like a decoy answer, right? Like one of those answer options that I know, like if I were to be asked this, I would probably not pick 10, right? Like I say, man, 8, 9 is okay, kind of confident, but you never know. So I'm happy to see some of you are confident. And I'm also happy that, see, anybody who is putting it at 3, 4, 5, 7, I'll just share the results. So this is what you guys feel. So I think if you're feeling kind of okay, getting there, confident, it's okay. Don't worry if that one person has put it as a nightmare, but I'm not sure whether that person has really gone through the course, whether he has kind of really seen how it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little. By the way, on the chat window, can you just go ahead and type something so that I know that? Just go ahead and type on the chat window. You see the chat window, right? Great. Hi, Shweta. So, hi, Dharmesh. So what you can do is, hi, Minerva. Hi, everyone else, right? Kind of going a little too fast. Thank you so much. Good morning. Why don't you just give me your sense of sentence correction? Give me your sense of sentence correction. Okay. By the way, today's session is going to be kind of free flowing, right? What I'm really trying to do is distill all that I know about sentence correction, all my knowledge of sentence correction, and I'm trying to distill and I'm going to give it to you. I'm not, organized it as a set of PPTs. And usually what happens is when you have a webinar or a live session, you have like a set of PPTs, you kind of go through the structure, but I'm going to keep it slightly more flexible. I want to understand where is it that you are struggling and try to tailor today's session according to the kind of questions and queries you have. So I have a bunch of questions. I'm going to use those questions, but before I get into the questions, what are your challenges when it comes to sentence correction on the GMAT? What are your challenges? And what I would like you to do is, if you can just, you see this Q&A button over here? You see a Q&A button? So in that Q&A button, if you could just post, right? And I want you to be descriptive about it, correct? So Shweta, that is exactly what I don't want, right? I would like you to be descriptive about it. If you could just tell me that sentence correction questions take more time because, I take whatever, right? So give me something more because, just looking at the word time, I would not be able to figure out. So if you can just, can you do this? Can you see this Q&A button? Yeah. Arbab, can you just put it in the Q&A button? Okay, so I have the first question from Mayank, which is moving effectiveness from 50% to 70%, correct? Minerva, what I mean is concept videos and application videos in the course, correct? So the concept and the application videos. So that tells me that you are kind of pretty much, we will be on the same, page. Okay. So great. I got a bunch of questions. So let me try answering it, right? So the first question that I've got is, how do I go from, let's say, 50% accuracy to, let's say, 70% accuracy, correct? So how do I go from 50 to 70% accuracy? Let me just, are all of you able to see a white screen? Just put it on the chat window. You're able to see a white screen? Oh, great. Okay, cool. So this is the catch. How do I now go to the other window? This. Okay. So first things first, let's understand, let's zoom out, what are the SC, concepts. See, one thing that you need to understand about sentence correction, right, especially when you're starting out, correct, is right now it looks like there are a bunch of rules and each one seems to be, having its own set of sub rules, exceptions and so on, correct? But let us look at the rules, right? So the first rule is subject-verb agreement. And subject-verb agreement, there is either going to be, the subject that gets to be, kind of confused, or you have a middleman, correct? So what GMAT does is, subject-verb is a heavily tested concept, right? I've said this and I'm repeating myself, but heavily tested. All that you need to do is understand what is the subject, understand what is the verb, correct? Now, in order for you to understand what is the subject and what is the verb, right, even before you get here, what you need to do is you need to understand. So I'm going to put that at sentence structure. I'm going to put that as the first sentence construction. See, if you don't know how a sentence is constructed, if you don't know what is a clause, you don't know what is a dependent clause, you don't know what is a a phrase, correct? You don't know what's a run-on sentence. You don't know what. So when you get into that, right, if you don't fix that problem, if you don't kind of get a good hang of what a sentence construction is going to be like, everything else is going to be hard for you, correct? Because what happens is sentence construction, it kind of draws the boundary. Think of it this way, right? You're playing football, correct? If you're going to play football, the first thing that you need to know is, what's the field, right? Like, where is the goal, correct? Where do I hit? And so sentence structure or sentence construction plays the same role, correct? It is telling you the boundary. It is telling you, look, the field is so big, correct? And I think a very important point that people tend to miss out is they zone in and they start looking at individual words. Remember, a sentence, you have to have a slightly zoomed out view, correct? Where you're looking at, okay, what is the subject, what is the verb corresponding to it, and so on, right? Now, coming to this particular thing, right, which is when you look at sentence construction, I'm just going to take a small detour and let's just talk about it, right? So, can anyone on the chat window type something in the chat window? Any sentence, like simple, easy. Give me any topic. Give me any subject. I will try creating questions on the fly. Give me any topic, any subject. I will create questions from that. GMAT, okay. So I'm going to create a question on GMAT, right? So GMAT is a tough, and I'm going to give you a slightly positive statement, right? Is an interesting test, right? So I got a few of you giving me other, so Srinath, parallelism, run on, you know what, we'll get that. Raghav, thanks for that example. The Indian woman in the neighborhood cooks pretty well. Let me do this. Let me take, a simple sentence and let me start with GMAT. GMAT is an interesting test. GMAT is an interesting test, but CAT is even more interesting. GMAT is an interesting test, which is used by MBA programs. GMAT is an interesting test. If GMAT is an interesting test, then I am James Bond. Okay, let me just give you another. Because GMAT is an interesting test, I like to teach it. All right, so I got a bunch of examples around the word GMAT is an interesting test. So let's just look at how this test is, how these questions are constructed, so that you get a sense. So let's take the first one. So the first one is what is called as a simple sentence, correct? So this is correct. So it's a simple sentence. What it does is it basically gives you a subject, correct? So you're able to see what the subject is. The subject is the word GMAT, correct? So with the word GMAT, so you say GMAT subject is an interesting test. So this entire thing becomes a predicate for you, correct? Yeah. So this, I just keep clicking on something else than the one that I have to. Yeah. So that is my subject. This becomes my predicate. Okay. Sentence type number 1. This is called a simple sentence. Simple sentence will not be tested on GMAT. Or let me rephrase it. If you are getting tested on simple sentence, then unfortunately you're not doing very well on the GMAT. Okay, because GMAT, if it gives you a simple sentence, there is really very little for it to do, right? I mean, what can GMAT do, right? If it's going to give you just a subject and a predicate, right? So what GMAT will do is GMAT will give you, so I'm going to take the next example, right? So this is an example of where you have one clause. You see this? GMAT is an interesting test. You have one clause, correct? You have another clause, CAT is even more interesting, correct? So independent clause, GMAT is an interesting test. CAT is even more interesting, independent clause. What are they connected with? They are connected with a conjunction but. Okay. So it's called fanboys for and. Okay. So anyway, that part you can just check up. But the whole idea is when you have a conjunction like but, you can connect two independent clauses. On the GMAT, you will get sentence structures that are like this. Or you could get one more sentence structure. In this sentence structure, what you have is you have an independent clause, correct? GMAT is an interesting test. Then what happens? You have this kind of structure, which is a dependent clause. See, which is used by used by MBA programs. By the way, let me just check your knowledge on the chat window. You can type out what is this, what kind of clause is it? What kind of clause is it? Which is used by MBA? Perfect. It's a dependent clause, but I'm looking at a particular name for it. Arnab got it. It is relative clause. Remember, which se shuru hota hai, it's a relative clause. It's a dependent clause, correct, but it's a relative clause. All right. So now let me go to fourth, right? So fourth, what you see is a kind of, sometimes what may happen is that you may have, like, this is called as a correlative conjunction, right? I mean, don't worry too much about the this thing, but so you have one thing, if X, then Y kind of thing. Actually, the technical term for it, I would suggest don't bother about it. Within conjunctions, there is correlative conjunctions, coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions. It can get messy. So just understand that, can this structure work? Yeah, is this structure can work if clause, then clause, correct? And here is one more example. Again, it's a repetition of something similar to what we saw earlier, which is you have a dependent clause. Because GMAT is an interesting test, then what is the main clause? I like to teach it. I like to teach it becomes my main clause. Because GMAT is an interesting test becomes a dependent clause, correct? And the order of the dependent clause it's actually called a subordinating clause, in case you're just interested to know the technical details. But I could have said, I like to teach the GMAT because it is an interesting test, correct? So, you can kind of move around dependent clauses a little bit inside the sentence, don't worry. But if you have understood these 5 sentence structures, you pretty much understand how sentence structures are going to be tested on the GMAT, correct? So now what we need to do is we just need to be careful that when we are looking at subject verb, Akash had this question. Okay, I have 2 questions, Naresh. Is it cause and effect example in question number 5? Yes, 5 is cause and effect, right? What is the cause? Because GMAT is an interesting test. What is the effect? I like to teach it. Akash had a question. I like to teach it, not an independent clause. No, I like to teach it is not a dependent clause. I like to teach it because of the word it. Remember, a clause cannot become dependent. Just because it has a referent elsewhere doesn't matter. See, you're looking at it from a GMAT perspective, right? Ki GMAT perspective may, if there is a pronoun, the noun should appear in the same sentence. But pick up a book, pick up a newspaper, correct? Oh, every time he's not going to repeat, no, that noun. So many a times you'll have sentences which will have the word it in it, him in it, her in it, correct? And this him, her, it and all that is referenced somewhere else, correct? So that's the idea. So I like to teach it is actually an independent clause. What is a dependent clause? Because GMAT is an interesting test. Why? Because it cannot stand by itself. Urvashi, if you can just tell me what part of sentence 5 did you not understand, I can focus on that. But I have another thing coming up, so don't worry. I have something coming up for you. Just stay with me in about 25 minutes or so. We'll be taking up questions. I have a question which is going to test you on structure similar to this. But before that, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. And this is in general, Urvashi, I'm not picking up on your particular question, but one request for all of you, you have to understand that chat is a very restrictive medium, correct? Like if you were to be in front of me, you would see my face, you would see me, you would, actually when I'm speaking right now, my hands are moving my hands around, right? Because that's how I love to teach. But when you ask me a question, if you type out one sentence or a few words, what happens is it's very hard for me to get the context, correct? So just before you type, just try to, very specifically, give me some sense on that, right? Rupam, I'm going to be talking about whether and if. It's already covered in one of the application videos, but I'll be talking about whether and if shortly, okay? All right, so there are only 2 ways in which GMAT can really confuse you on this. As I told you, one is you have either a middleman or you end up, having a structure where the subject itself can be confusing, right? From SVA, let me get on to the next one. So let me just change the font, go back to blue. So the next one is pronouns. Now, pronouns, people worry about pronouns a lot, okay? So I'm going to keep it very simple, okay? I'm going to give you a very simple rule, right? Thumb rule when it comes to pronouns. See, don't use pronouns as a rule for elimination, okay? Until you get down to the last 2 or 3 answer options, and the difference between these answer options is a pronoun, correct? So I'll just, say this again. Don't use pronouns in your first level of elimination, correct? Don't use it in your first level of defense, which means if you are eliminate based on SVA, eliminate based on parallelism, eliminate based on tenses, anything that's like a bigger rule, don't get to pronouns. Solve for pronouns when there is a difference between the 2 answer options, correct? And when you see a difference between 2 answer options, if one answer option either removes the pronoun or replaces the pronoun with the actual noun, if you have, let's say, an option like that, and you have another option where there is only a pronoun, and that could potentially be confusing. In that case, pick an answer choice where either the need for a pronoun has been taken out or the noun has been replaced, right? It has been replaced with the right noun. Don't pick the one that has got a pronoun. That could potentially be confusing. But apart from that, please don't look at an answer choice and jump and say it is the reason why I'm eliminating. Okay, so just take my sage-like advice, right? And just don't pick that as a reason to eliminate. Modifiers can be very tricky, correct? So essentially modifiers, there are 2 types. You either have adjectival modifiers, correct? What are adjectival modifiers? You have modifiers like which, you have modifiers like appositives, correct? All of these form adjectival modifiers. Then you have adverbial modifiers. What are adverbial modifiers? We saw this, we saw present participles ending a clause, correct? That was used. So this is a kind of an adverbial modifier, right? So the deal with modifiers, especially on the GMAT, is I'm just looking at the question. Yeah. Okay. So Raghav had this question. AC. So Raghav, great point actually. See, what happens is it's very hard for me to kind of say, just this particular concept or that particular concept. So let me give you a small example, right? Let us take subject verb, correct? So if you take subject verb, if you realize in subject verb, while we were doing this middleman concept, correct? See, I have to explain to you that a type of a middleman is an appositive, correct? So it is impossible for me to say, ki, I'm going to teach you SVA, but I'm not going to touch upon the concept of modifiers at all, correct? And then when we get to modifiers, I say, oh, by the way, you've never seen this before. Here is appositives, correct? So that is the nature of GMAT, correct? So somewhere you will realize that SVA and modifiers are very closely tied, because whenever you look at a middleman, you're probably looking at a kind of it could be a which, or it could be an appositive. You're looking at a kind of a modifier, correct? So it is not possible to teach SVA without introducing the concept of a modifier. But what I've tried to do in the videos, and this is something that I do in the class, and that's how the whole course videos have come, is I try to keep it simple so that when you learn SVA, you cannot know that there is something called appositives, something called, a relative clause, but you don't kind of worry too much about it. But when we get to it in modifiers is when we deep dive and see more of it, all right? So yeah, modifiers. So here is the deal, right? And in case, Prabal Dixit, can we have an example of in middleman and appositive used together? Yeah, an appositive is a middleman, right? So See, what I would suggest is have a look at, I think I've mentioned this in the course as well. So you can have a look at it, but let me do this. Let me give you an example. So can you give me an example of an appositive? It's nothing but a descriptive phrase, right? It's nothing but a descriptive phrase, correct? So I will say, so in fact, there is an example that I give. Yeah, that's the example that I give. Let me give you another example, okay? Let me give you another example. Uh, how about this? Correct. So just a simple example, but what happens is you have like a part that would be underlined over here. So the part that would be underlined over here would be garden is now the traffic capital of the gardens is now the traffic capital of the world. So what happens is many times when we look at this kind of a sentence, again, I'm giving you a slightly simpler sentence. When we look at some of the questions, you'll be able to see, I'll be giving you a question with a positive and stuff, but you tend to look at only this. You see the problem. So what I'll do is I'll just look at it and say, acha, gardens is now the traffic. So you'll say, are ye to plural hai, correct? Gardens hai. Why is this, is it should be R, but you have to look at the thing that what is modifying is Bangalore, not the word gardens, correct? So that's one way in which you can do it. But just one point I wanted to just tell you, I don't know if it's going to make you feel good or bad. I've been teaching sentence correction, right? So for a long time, trust me, 90% of students, okay, I've taught ever in my life, okay, 90% of my students, that if I were to ask them what, according to them, is the most trickiest area in sentence correction, I'm pretty sure 90% of them are going to say modifiers, correct? See, the problem with modifiers is modifier doesn't get tested as modifier alone, correct? Modifier gets tested with SVA, modifier gets tested with parallelism, modifier gets tested with comparison. In fact, that is one key thing that you have in comparison, correct? When two things are being compared, what GMAT would do is it would modify both of them differently, correct? So that's a classic trap that you can see on the GMAT, correct? So modifiers are a kind of this concept, but anything specific in modifier that you want me to deep dive into? Great. Arnav has got a good example, right? Arun, a GMAT tutor from CrackVerbal, so that becomes the appositive, right? Modifying the word Arun, is teaching sentence correction. Perfect, Arnav, I like that. Mayank, that's a good example. That's the one that I say, but you have twisted it nice. Mahatma Gandhi, father of the nation, practices law. Excellent. I went to see a movie, which is quite interesting. By the way, Pallavi, this is not appositive, right? Just to kind of clarify, I went to see a movie, which was quite interesting. It's not this, but yeah, it uses a relative clause, correct? Now, any specific questions on sentence on this that you want me to touch upon? Anything in modifiers? I know it's a lot of things, but anything that confuses you or anything that you think comma plus. So what is confusing you on that part? I just want to understand what part of that is confusing to you. Urvashi, it's not rules within participle modifier. Okay. Got it. Okay, let me do this. I think, yeah. So Pallavi, I think that's a very valid thing, right? When you're confused with a lot of things. So okay, just one thing. Okay, I already have a bunch of questions that you've given me in Q&A, so I'm going to get into Q&A. Correct. So I asked like within modifiers, and you have to be very specific. Rupam, again, I'm going to go back to this, right? See, today's session, we have 90 minutes with me, right? I'm trying to add maximum value. So if you're going to ask me something that is already in the course, and if I'm going to say that, that is, you know, I can teach you, right? I can teach you for the next 1 hour, right? But, you know, let's try to keep our interaction where, you know, I'm able to add maximum value, correct? So if you can ask me something which, you know, a slightly more specific things, I would be able to help. But again, I'm just seeing that. So Vignesh has a valid point. Rules within participle modifiers. Okay, I kind of get where you're coming from. Let me just try to see if there is a way by which I can just touch upon it. So let me do this. Let me come back to modifiers. Let me go on to the next one over here. Let me just keep the color the same. This is the same, yeah. So the fifth concept we have is parallelism. Parallelism works in two cases. When there is a list of things, how do I know there is a list of things? You see the word and, or you have what is called as a correlative conjunction. For example, X and Y. So not only X, but also Y, correct? And so on, okay? Either X or Y, both X and Y, so on. Parallelism, heavily tested on the GMAT, okay? Very heavily tested on the GMAT, correlative conjunctions heavily tested. Here is what I would do. You know, parallelism, as I said earlier, it's like playing an odd man out game. Correct. If you like playing an odd man out game, you like parallelism. The problem with parallelism that I've seen with the ways students solve questions is they tend to make everything parallel. Correct. They look at something and say sub parallel kar denge, you know, we'll change all the things into, you know, parallel structure. And sometimes what happens when they do that, they kind of lose the essence. So remember, on tougher GMAT questions, you could be, you know, potentially tricked on that. And I'm going to give you a question that will hopefully, you know, underscore that point. Then you have comparison, right? So all that I need to do is X with Y. I need to compare. If you remember, LHS is equal to RHS is the formula that we need to know. What is LHS is equal to RHS? We need to make sure that the thing that we are comparing is logically and grammatically comparable. That's it. You know, as a rule, I mean, obviously, there are a bunch of things like, for example, one important thing over there is like versus as, correct? So I mean, obviously, those are specific things, but to a large extent, if you just take a step back, right? SVA is nothing but there will be a subject, there will be a verb, they'll try to confuse you. Pronouns, they'll give you a pronoun, they'll confuse you. Oh, you know which noun it refers to, correct? Then you have modifiers. It is going to modify something very clearly. When it modifies something, what is going to happen? It is going to change the meaning, correct? So whenever you have a scenario where, you know, a modifier is changing the meaning, you know that, okay, you know, there is a logical error possibly, correct? But as I said, modifiers are also used with other things, correct? Parallelism. Either you have a list of things or you have this not only X but also Y kind of construct. You just need to make sure all the elements in that list or X and Y are parallel. Sometimes it may happen that what looks parallel is actually not parallel. It's called superficial parallelism. We will be discussing that. I'll be showing you a question based on that. I don't want to give out too much from the question so that you start predicting what the questions are. Then you have comparison. You're going to compare two things, make sure that they are logically kind of comparable, correct? What is the second thing we have? Tenses, correct? What is going to be in tenses? Just make sure that is consistent with the meaning of the sentence, correct? So what will happen is a lot of times when you look at tenses, there will be clues given to you in the ununderlined part, okay? So you'll have something that says since 1970, correct? If you say the word since 1970, it means it started with, you know, it started in 1970, but it is continuing till now. So the moment I see that, I know that I can't use something like had been, I'll have to use something like have been, correct? If it says in 1970, then it becomes different. If it becomes in 1970, then I either have a past perfect tense like had been, or I use the past tense were, correct? So you just need to be very careful when something is happening. If you ask me, that's the only trick that tenses can play, okay? You have to get a good sense of when something happened, and that part is not something that is governed by grammar. That part is governed by meaning. Okay, so in fact, I would say this for all the topics that you're doing: don't let grammar dictate logic. Let logic dictate grammar. First, understand from a logical perspective. When is this happening? When you know when it is happening, then you figure out, okay, what should it be, had been or have been? What I see with students a lot of times is that without taking that step back, without having an understanding of what the intent of the sentence is, they tend to jump and directly start struggling with, had been, have been, right? Sometimes they'll come to me and say, Arun, tell me, is this had been or have been? I said, I don't know, right? You ought to take a step back. You ought to look at it. You ought to understand what it's saying, correct? And that's really the trick, or that's really the key, behind tenses. And finally, the eighth one is where we have, what is this, broad thing called idioms, right? So to be honest, one of the reasons why we had not put idioms is because there is really nothing to teach in idioms but through questions. But here is a good news. We have just shot a set of videos on idioms, and it will be uploaded in the next couple of days. So just make sure that you watch you should be able to get that content in a couple of days, right? So what happens in idioms is, remember, the idioms that you're going to be tested are not idioms like it is raining cats and dogs, he kicked the bucket and all that. See, those are not idioms you're going to be tested. Typically what you'll have is something called as a phrasal verb. So what is a phrasal verb? Phrasal verb is, do I say associated to or associated with? What is the correct preposition? It is associated with, not associated to. I am associated with this organization, right? Instead of saying associated to this organization. Why? There is no logic behind it. It's just associated with, it's not associated to, correct? There is really no logic to it. So that's one of the things that you need to look at. The second thing that you'll be tested on is these kind of conjunctions, right? So conjunctions like you have, I'm going to put it over here. So you have conjunctions like, for example, which say so X that Y. It is so large that you cannot see it, or it's so large that you can see it from space, correct? So X that Y. So these kind of constructions are also kind of idioms that are tested. So that's pretty much, I'm just trying to zoom out and give you a sense of, what are the various things. So Raghav, if you understand, I can't be solving questions, like ad hoc like this, right? But what I can do is I can probably give you a sense of it. But in general, I don't like to take questions ad hoc, right? Because what happens is others then don't get a context of the question, correct? But since what you have asked is, something slightly more specific, I can still give a stab at it. But in general, from the next session onwards, if you want me to discuss any question, please mail it to us. I would be glad to take up specific questions. If I see that particular doubt or question would add value, correct, I would like to take that up. Okay, so I'm going to take this so all of you can look into the chat window. Raghav Bazari has given this question, correct? Okay, so I'll just, so all of you, I'm on this topic on this, right? So I'm just looking at this sentence. That gives right. So let's take these two sentences. Okay. So I'm just giving you the two sentences. I hope you're able to see the two sentences over here. Correct. How do I extend the screen? Are all of you able to see the example that I gave in red? Okay, you're able to see that, right? Okay. So now I'm just going to take this. Arun giving a lot of examples taught sentence correction, correct? And the second one is Arun, who gave a lot of examples taught sentence correction. You know what? Actually, I just realized that I need another example because this example seems to be kind of this. Can I do this? Can I give a new? Can I just wipe out whatever is there? Because whatever you see is more of a recap. Let me just try to write down again. Okay, so that it's easier. By the way, all of this recording is going to be available to you, right? So don't worry on that. Let me give you another example because that who wala example mein na, it doesn't. I'm just trying to think, but I'm just. You know what? I'm kind of at a loss of another analogy, so I'm just trying to think of. Um, I'm just making it up, okay? So now here is a concept that you need to understand: the concept of what is called as an essential and a non-essential modifier, right? So what is an essential modifier? What is a non-essential modifier? Correct. So this first part, what you see is an essential modifier. Whereas over here, what you see is an example of a non-essential modifier. So let me just give you that in the form of the thing that is tested over here. So if you see, the subject over here is the tree. You see, in both cases, the subject is the tree, correct? What kind of tree? You say the tree has been cut down. That's what you're saying. Tree has been cut down. Now, in both the cases, right, you see that there is a modifier. The first modifier says that gave golden fruits. Second one says giving golden fruits. Giving golden fruits is an example of a non-essential modifier. Typically, all participle modifiers are non-essential modifiers. What do I mean by a non-essential modifier? A non-essential modifier is something that having had dinner, I decided to go for a walk. Now, the point is I decided to go for a walk. That is complete by itself. I am now adding some extra information to you. I am saying having had dinner, correct? So having had dinner, the participle is adding value, but without it, the rest of the sentence still makes sense. I decided to go for a walk, correct? But what if I were to say the bike that was stolen has been found by the police. Now look at this. What kind of bike? Is it any bike in the world? No, I am talking about a specific bike. The bike that was stolen, right? So just remove this word that was stolen and tell me if the rest of the sentence would have made sense, right? The bike, and I just go on to directly say, was found by the police. The bike has been found by the police. What bike are you talking about? Correct? So without this modifier, this sentence would not make sense. Correct? So similarly, are we talking about a specific tree? The specific tree that gave golden fruits? If you're trying to specify that, then please say that gave golden fruits. But if you're going to say giving golden fruits, it's a non-essential modifier. You're just saying, by the way, golden fruits also it gives, right? But it's not a main thing. Main thing is the tree has been cut down. So I think somewhere you need to understand the meaning for us to, really understand. So going back to this particular example, right? If you see the fact that the elephant that gives rights, correct, and giving rights, you're talking about a specific elephant, the one that gives ride. How can in the non-essential example can you ignore? I can't ignore, right, Raghav? If I ignore it, what will happen? That the elephant had been earning. What elephant are you talking about? Any elephant? Elephant in the African jungles? No. We are looking at a specific elephant. What is that elephant? The elephant that gives ride to children at the zoo. So that's where we are being very specific. All right. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start off with a question. All right. So I'm going to have a question for you. So what we will do is we will try to take like, a couple of minutes, right? For the, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this question. All right. So I just want to make sure that you are able to are all of you able to see the PPT? Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. What I want you to do is please don't type in the chat window. Okay. This time I'm going to flip it. Don't type in the chat window. All of you understand? Because everybody else is solving. If you have got it right, excellent, power to you, but don't put it in the chat window. I'm going to give you a poll. You just already answered a couple of polls, so you know how it works. So I'm going to give you a poll question. I'm going to give you the poll at the end of about 90 seconds. I don't want to give it right now. Let us take the next question. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. Time starts now. 90 seconds over. I'm going to give you some more time. Okay, so I just gave you quite a lot more. I gave you almost 3 minutes. Okay, so at this point, if you have not been able to solve this question, please go ahead and make an educated guess. Okay, whatever you think, I'm going to end the poll now. So please go ahead and make an educated guess. All of you who are kind of left, some more. If you're hearing, please go ahead and mark whatever you think is your lucky letter between A and D. Okay, cool. So I'm going to end the poll now. So let's look at how the results are. So you see, there seems to be a majority with due to. Someone picked E. There is also a few with A, B, C. Correct. Now, okay, I didn't share the result. Sorry. So this is the result. Okay. So this is how people have done on this question, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through it like, way I would have looked at it on the GMAT and how we go about solving this. But before we get there, if you had actually, looked up the, just one second, yeah. So if you had actually looked up, this particular concept, I'll just tell you how it works. So because, there is another word because of and due to, correct? So the way it works is because needs a clause on either side. Think of it that way. Because needs a clause on either side. So then what happens is I would say I will win because I work hard, correct? When you say because of, the thing is it still modifies a clause, but it ends up modifying it using just a noun. So what happens over here is I will win because of my hard work. Okay. Right? I will win because of my hard work. Now let me give you one more example. Okay. Due to. So when you have a due to, you typically have a noun on both sides. Okay. So what you're going to say is my win was due to my hard work. Okay. This is how these three things work. Due to, you can think of it as a preposition. Okay. Because you can think of it as a conjunction. In fact, even because of also in some sense acts similarly, correct? But these are the three things that you need to understand. Okay. Vignesh asked, what is the difficulty level? Vignesh, one thing that I would request all of you while you're studying, I know it becomes very, you are very curious to know the difficulty level of a question, correct? But I can tell you that in my experience, and let no GMAT instructor tell you this, okay? Because it's virtually impossible, man, right? To tell the and see what you mean by difficulty level, right? It's very complex, right? I can't get around to telling you how complex it is. So it is impossible for anyone to know the difficulty level for a question, correct? Number one. What I can tell, however, is whether you found it difficult or not, correct? So I may find a parallelism question very difficult, okay? Or I may find a subject-verb agreement question very simple. That is because I find it difficult. I find it easy. You get it? So difficulty is actually as per the individual attempting that question. You don't have like a magic number which says this is like difficulty. Having said that, there are obviously questions that are going to be difficult for everyone, correct? But don't waste energy trying to figure out the difficulty level. Number two, on the GMAT, on the test, okay, that would be a terrible thing for you to do. Because what happens is when you're solving a question, our 100% has to be invested in solving that question, in getting to the right answer. If you're going to dissipate your energy by thinking, oh, what was the difficulty level, right? Because many times what will happen is you will have very tough questions that would be deceptive. correct? So by the way, Vignesh, I'm just telling you, not because you had a question. I'm telling this because I want this to, I want everyone to know this, correct? Because what he's asking is true for everyone. It's not that you are asking alone, right? So when you're taking the test, make sure that you're not focusing too much on worrying about it, because sometimes really tough questions, like really tough ones, they look deceptively simple, right? If I give you like a real tough question, chances are you'll jump into the right answer choice or wrong answer options just because it looks, very simple. Because I work hard, I will win. Yes, perfect, right? So what I told earlier, which is you can change your order of the dependent clause, correct? So because I work hard, I will win is perfectly okay, not a problem, okay? Now that we have understood this, let us now get into this questions. Okay, so let me just clear this up. Let me get into the questions. Okay, so now let us look at how each question is constructed, like each sentence word is constructed. First one says, you see this, because an oversupply of computer chips has sent prices plunging. So let me see this. Because an oversupply of computer chips, this is a subject, correct, has sent prices plunging. This becomes a predicate. So what you're saying is be followed by a clause. Then look at the next one. The manufacturer, which is again the subject, has announced. What does that mean? Predicate. So what you have over here is another independent clause, correct? So structure wise, I think this is fine. So let me hold on to A, okay? So whenever you are looking at A, just hold on, let's see, because I know the difference is because of due to. So let me just check that. Because of plunging prices for computer chips, so let me understand this. Because of plunging prices for computer chips. I'm okay with because of plunging prices. I don't know if the word for would be here or the word of would be here, right? Again, this is a doubt. I'm not sure. That's what I'm thinking. But is that a reason for me to reject? No, because I have the correct structure because of noun. That's what I want, right? Because of should be followed by a noun. So far, I'm okay with it. This seems to be kind of in line. Now let me look at what this is saying, which is due to an oversupply. Okay, so remember the which rule, correct? So what should which modify? Which should modify the preceding noun. All of you remember that. Which modifies only the preceding noun or the noun phrase, correct? Now tell me, which is due to an oversupply. See, when you see which being used as an explanation for something, chances are you're looking at the wrong construction. Which is not computer chips, right? Computer chips is not due to an oversupply. It is the plunging prices which is due to an oversupply. So what happens over here is you see a problem with which, correct? So for that reason, I can take out B. Now I'm going to just, try it out for a slide this. If I were to remove the word which is due to an oversupply, so now let's just understand, is the due to over here fine? Actually, it is fine. The due to over here is not a problem. The due to is actually fine over here, correct? So that wouldn't be a reason for me to eliminate, right? Which is the reason for me to eliminate. Now look at answer option C. It says which resulted. What is which referring to? I need a noun, correct? You can't say computer chips have been sent plunging. This cannot be modified by which. So what I do, I remove answer option C also. Now let's look at the word due to. Due to, now it says plunging computer chip prices from an oversupply. You have a noun followed by what do you have? You have a clause, correct? So when you have such a structure, We just saw you cannot use due to this way. Similarly, look at E, due to an oversupply. So here it says due to an oversupply. Then what is it modifying? It's now saying this word with. What is with doing here? With the result that. Do I need this word result with the result that? If I were to remove this whole thing with the result that, wouldn't it still not retain the meaning? So what it means is I have 4 extra words that don't add to the value or the meaning of the sentence, correct? That is one reason why I can remove answer option E. Is there anything else? Due to an oversupply, comma, computer prices have been sent plunging. What is this? Have been sent plunging. This thing is again a clause. What did I tell you? Think of due to as a preposition. It can connect two nouns. It cannot connect a clause with it. Answer option E also goes off, leaves you with the right answer choice, A for alpha. Correct? So this is an example of how to use because of, due to. All of you clear on this? So Saloni had a question. If he had a that instead of a which, it would still be, kind of wrong because you are again trying to modify. Just one second. Yeah. So so even if you have a that, you still have the same problem. In some sense, it's not comparison, right, Akash? It is not comparison, right? Because I'm connecting two clauses over here. So what I was trying to do is just, tell you the difference between because of, correct? That is one part, okay? So Saloni had a question, which is, can I use that? That also would give you the, see, look at answer option B. If I use the word that, because of plunging prices for computer chips, that is due to an oversupply. Computer chips that is due to an oversupply or plunging prices that is due to an oversupply creates a confusion, right? So whenever you see confusion like that, you probably have a problem. So which and that, irrespective, still would have been a problem. Pallavi, when you asked me to explain answer option D, which part of answer option D did you not understand, right? Because whatever I said is really my explanation, which is number one, you have due to plunging computer prices from an oversupply, correct? This entire thing, even if I were to take this to be a noun, I have to have another noun due to, okay, I'll give you an example, okay? So let me give you, okay? The match was cancelled due to rains is wrong because you have a clause, correct? Or you could say due to rains, the match was cancelled. It is still wrong, correct? But when I say the cancellation was due to rains, is right because you have cancellation and then you have rains, both of which are nouns on either side, okay? So I'm just going to quickly go and see if there is anything else. So yeah, comparison is not tested. I just revisited D because of an oversupply of competitive. Jimmy, I don't even look at what could be the right structure, right? So my take is that you can create your own sentences. Unfortunately, on the GMAT, it's of no use, correct? Because GMAT is not going to, look at you constructing the right sentence. So any student who comes to me and takes an official sentence and twists it, correct, and says, what if this had been an answer option? I usually don't entertain such questions. And my strong recommendation to you, and I know when you're starting off, it looks very hard because every sentence we try to create the right structure, but trust me, don't do that. Okay. Don't do that. Just, look at what are the options. Am I able to eliminate it? This whole temptation of trying to create the right answer is not going to help you a lot. Okay. So let's get on to the next question. Okay. This time I'm going to give you 2 minutes. All right. All right. So I gave you almost 2.5 minutes. I'm just going to give you the poll question now. All right. So please go ahead and mark the answer because you've already taken time. I just want to make sure that you have marked it. So please, even if you're confused between the last two, three, whatever, please go ahead and give me an answer. All right. So I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So let's see how you did. So as you see, it's a mixed question, but going back to that particular thing, right? It's like how many of you, and you can put this on the chat window, how many of you thought it's not a very difficult question? Did anyone feel that it was not a very difficult question? Anybody? Okay. So you felt it's not a very difficult question. Okay, got it. Right. So the reason I'm saying this is because what happens is when you look at such a question, it can be pretty misleading, correct? Because what we are looking at is we are looking at something very simple, right? That's what we tend to do. We tend to, look at it. So most people, if you see, have chosen answer option B, correct? Because what happens over here is we like to see, and I'm just trying to, talk about this one point, which is about parallelism, correct? So what happens over here is I look at it and I say, okay, so what could be going on over here? So the first thing is regulated the use of bicycles. Second one is mandated a maximum speed of 8 miles, required of cyclists to do something, and granted pedestrians way of right, correct? Now, it looks pretty obvious, right? That All of them have to be parallel. But here is the trick in this question. The trick in this question is all of what you say, the 3 or 4 things that you say, are all of them parallel to each other? Are all of them parallel to each other? Can you say that the ordinance regulated the use of bicycles? See, when you say regulated the use of bicycles, what does it mean? It means this is the superset. I want you to think of it in terms of a superset concept. So the superset is it regulated the use of bicycles. Remember, regulated is not in the same list as the other elements. Correct? So what happened over here? They regulated. Now, how did they regulate? How did they regulate? They regulated by doing a bunch of things. 1, they mandated something. 2, they required cyclists to do something else. And 3, they granted pedestrian way of life. So the way, right of way, sorry. So the way I look at it is regulated, correct? Somewhere comes on the top. How was it regulated? It was regulated by doing A, B, and C. This is a concept called superficial parallelism. Okay. So if I were to give you a sentence which says, let me think of a sentence. Amit studied for the GMAT. Okay. Amit studied for the GMAT, solved questions from the OG, and took practice tests from MBA.com. Amit studied for the GMAT, number 1. Number 2, practiced questions from the OG. Number 3, took practice tests from MBA.com. Do you see a problem with this sentence? Is there a problem with this sentence? What I just told you now. You can write it in the chat window. Is there a problem? What is the problem? Don't just say yes, but what is the problem? I studied for the GMAT, practiced questions from the OG, and took tests from MBA.com. Correct. See, the thing is, how he studied is not the same as the fact that he studied. So, Amit studied for the GMAT is the superset. Then you say, how did he study? You will say, practicing questions from OG and solving, or rather taking tests from MBA.com. Correct? That's how you would go about for that particular thing. Now, look at this particular question. Correct? In this particular question, what you realize is that you have a word like, so the first one is this thing, right? The regulation, correct? Then you have the 3 things that tell you how it is getting regulated. So did all of you get this concept called superficial parallelism? So by that logic, I can't have regulated and mandated in the same level, correct? I can't have regulated and mandated at the same level. So I know for a fact that regulated and mandated cannot be at the same level. A goes off, B goes off, correct? Now C says regulating the use of bicycles, mandated, required, granted. D says regulating the use, mandating this, requiring. So you now see again a problem. Regulating and mandating cannot be in the same level. So for that reason, I can remove D also. What am I left with? I'm left with answer option C and D. How did I get to C and D? I got to C and D only by using this simple logic that I have to look at the meaning. See, this is an example of why you should first look at the meaning of a sentence before you apply the rules of grammar. You remember what I told you, correct? If you had just jumped thinking it's a parallelism question, you would have actually gone down the wrong path. Okay, so again, warning you, be careful when you say parallelism. It's the logic that GMAT is going to test you. Someone was asking about a difficulty level. This is a difficult question, right? So you are not going to be seeing this question when you are, let's say, at a 600 on the GMAT, correct? Chances are the guy who is scoring a 700 is going to be asked this question to check whether he is going to go to a 750 or whether he should continue to be at 700 or lower, correct? Now between answer option C and D, let's see. Regulating, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of my eyes are looking at the differences. Regulating the use of bicycles, okay. Mandated a maximum speed of 8 miles per hour, okay. Required cyclists, now look at it. Required cyclists, do you see this? That they keep. Required cyclists that they keep feet on pedal or to keep feet on pedal, right? You don't even need to need that they. You need to say to, correct? That is problem number 1. Problem number 2, in the last element, do you see this word it and it granted? Well, when you say that ordinance did 3 things, what are the 3 things that it did? The ordinance mandated something, the ordinance required something, and the ordinance granted something. The word it granted breaks the parallel structure, correct? So that's the second reason why answer option C for Charlie goes off, leaving you with the perfectly correct answer, E for echo. What does E for echo say? Let us now take let's just zoom out a little and let's just try to understand how this works. What is the first thing it says? A New York City ordinance of 1897 regulating the use of bicycles. Correct? For example, I could say, a British Act of 1915 regulating the freedom of speech, correct? So now when I say regulating, remember regulating over here is not a verb. Were all of you able to understand that? Regulating over here is not a verb, okay? Regulating over here is a present participle. Someone was asking me about present participles, right? So regulating is a present participle, not a verb. It is describing the New York City Ordinance of 1897. That's what it does. Any questions? By the way, are you okay if we move, go till about, it's about 11:20. Is it okay if we go till about 11:40 or so? You're fine with that? Okay, cool. So I'll just go because I have a couple of more questions, but okay, very quick check. The way we are proceeding, is this kind of making sense to you? Like I'm just explaining things, I'm giving you questions, walking you through the questions, telling you, what it is. So Sweta, one of the main verbs is mandated, correct? So mandated is a verb, right? Required is a verb and granted is a verb, right? Okay. So all of you good with it? Any changes? Because I have a couple of other questions for you, but that's really what I wanted to do. Just, zoom into specific questions, but at the same time, also try to keep it slightly generic. Excellent. So, all right. So what we will do is, in that case, let's do this. Let's take the next question. Okay. Can B be? Yeah, great point. Sorry. Arnav, you're perfectly right. Answer option B, we also have an issue with the word and missing, correct? So if you see the word and is, so it says regulated the use of bicycles, okay? Mandated a maximum speed, okay? Required cycles, this, okay? And then it says granting. First of all, if granting were to be the present participle ending the clause, then it has to say that all the 3 verbs, right? Or like at least the last verb should modify it in some way. So A, there is a confusion there. B, even if granting were to be correct, let's assume for the sake of argument, granting is correct in answer option B. It is not, okay? But I'm just saying, let's assume it is correct. In which case, in answer option B, after 8 miles an hour and before the word required cyclists, I would have the word and, because that would be the third part of the list. Why can't the last part, that is pedestrian granted, why is this not the, because you tell me it's an ordinance. What are the things? If I grant pedestrians right of way, is that the ordinance itself or is it something that the ordinance will do? Correct? So regulating the use of bicycles and pedestrians. See, when you use the word pedestrian, it is in, okay, how do I put it? In a sentence, if I use the word pedestrian, I also need to have a word which says drivers, right? You are calling me pedestrian because someone else is a driver or a rider, correct? So giving or granting pedestrians right of way is one of the things that are stipulated in this regulation, correct? So Naresh, whatever I told you is the concept where you need to make sure that all the three elements are kind of parallel. You got that part? You got that part? Now what I'm saying is that in the case of parallel structure, we will typically have, what would we have in parallel structure? We would have regulated, mandated, required, granted. Four things, all four of them in parallel. That is what parallelism is, correct? But what superficial parallelism tells is that not every sentence can be parallel, okay? And you know, there are some cases where there is this concept of a superset, which is what I tried explaining by giving this example, also giving the example of Amit studied for the GMAT, right? So that example I gave with relation to that. Astitva, first part is in past tense. Why not be? I already explained why B is wrong. So what I would like you to do is, instead of looking at it saying, why is B wrong? Tell yourself B is wrong, correct? And especially see, not every question I'm going to come in front of you and explain, right? This is going to be tricky when you look at explanations in the OG, correct? So when you look for explanations in the OG, my suggestion is always start, don't worry about how it's being explained. First, tell yourself that B is the wrong answer, correct? And then from there, you cannot proceed. You will see that a lot of times you will sometimes get better explanation than what the OG, is saying. Okay, so yeah, I got a lot of errors. I'm going to go on to the next one. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Time starts now. Just to give you a sense, 2 minutes already over. I'm going to give you the poll. All right. So I gave you plenty of time. I'm going to end the poll now. Right. So I see got a mixed bag. So let's see. So I have 14 of you picking D. Okay. And that seems to be a majority. So between A and D, I seem to have pretty much, you know, most of you answering, correct? So I'll just share the result. I want you to think for a minute, okay? I want you to think for a minute, and I want you to think that, this is like a super tough question on the GMAT. I'm going to now give you like a slight background to it. So it's a tough question on the GMAT. Now, you know this background, correct? That you know it's a super tough question. Tell me, would the majority get the right answer or wrong answer? If it's a tough question, would majority get the right answer or wrong answer? And now you are able to actually see what answers others have chosen. Okay. Now, if I were to look at it that way, if I were to give you a chance, for example, to make a random guess, okay, let's say someone of you who has not solved it, if I were to give you this opportunity and say, hey, you know what, go ahead and make a random guess and try to pick the answer. Here is what I would do if I were you. I would pick any other answer option except A and D, correct? Because A and D are the ones that possibly, okay, possibly, I don't know, okay, you could surprise me. You could surprise me, but A and D, according to me, would be the two answer options I would remove, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have a look at how this sentence is constructed. For the farmer, remember tough questions, always remember the meaning. So it says for the farmer who takes care to keep them cool. Who are them? Who are them over here? Keep them cool means who? Farmers. Cows. Cows or cow? Cows or cow? What can them refer to? Cows, no? Cannot be cow, no? Right? Correct? So if it is cannot be cow, then my question to you is just look at the answer options. Which are the answer options that you think can straight away go off? Cow, you see this answer option D, cow, the Holstein cow. You see this, the Holstein cow. Answer option B and D go off directly. Okay, all of you who chose D, correct? Well, always you have to be careful. See, that's the thing about GMAT, right? Always give you something that, So now let's look at it. I'm going to give you something else, providing them with high feed energy, okay? Milking them regularly. So let me understand this. For a farmer who takes care, so what does he do? To keep them cool, providing them with high energy feed and milking them regularly. Now at this point in my head, I'm thinking, shouldn't it be keeping them cool? Correct? Keeping, providing, and milking. Just simple parallelism, right? You don't keep them and providing and milking, right? So keeping, right? Providing and milking. So what I look at is providing and milking seems to kind of go away from the parallel structure. Do you agree? Do you agree? Providing and milking seems to be going against the parallel structure. Problem number one. Problem number two. You see this, Holstein cows are producing. Are you telling me that all Holstein cows are producing? Or if this condition is met, if the farmer takes care to do X, Y, and Z, in that condition, the Holstein cow will do something. I want you to think about it. If the farmer does all of this, then the cow will do something, or for the farmer, this right now, Holstein cows are producing. You see this problem, are producing. Correct? For that reason, there is also a tense issue. Correct? So two problems. A does not seem to meet the parallel structure. Tense issue. Answer option A goes off. Answer option B. You know what? Keep, provided. But what is this milking? Again, parallel structure is broken. Right? Again, the problem is Holstein cows are producing. They are not producing now. If you do these things, then they will produce. Correct? So now what I do is, even if this tense part was not clear to you, I am pretty sure looking at the parallel structure, you would have been able to do that, which basically means I can knock off answer option C also. Leaves me with the right answer choice E. At this point, I'm not even cared what the right answer choice looks like. What do? I mark answer option E and move on. However, let's look at how the parallel structure works over here. The farmer who, okay, takes care to keep them. Now tell me, keep them cool, keep them provided with feed, and keep them milked regularly. This is what we have as the three things in parallel, right? The farmer who takes care to keep them, number one, cool, who takes care to keep them provided with high energy feed, who takes care to keep them milked regularly. If the farmer does these three things, the farmer will produce. See this? In the future, if you do all of this, correct, the Holstein cow will produce, right? For the coach who takes care to exercise the team well and keep them hydrated and give them high energy food, the team will perform, correct? I can't say that the team is performing, right? So for a coach who does these things, the team will do something. That's why E for echo. But when I kind of solved it, right, it looked a lot easier, right? Looked a lot easier. Do you agree? Now that I explained it to you, it's like, ये तो easy lag raha hai. How many of you picked D? You know, just 2 of you picked D. That's what happens on a tough question, right? On a tough question, you have to remember that sometimes, the answer can be simple, but, am I thinking in the right direction? What I would say at this point in your GMAT preparation, you have just started, a couple of weeks, you have kind of warmed up. My suggestion is don't get too caught up in knowing whether you are able to apply the rules or not. What I would just do is just ask yourself, am I looking at the right place? So I used 3 rules. I used pronouns. Despite me telling you, don't use pronouns as a first level of defense, did I not go against what I just said? But that is the point of the GMAT, right? It was such a glaring error. You have provided them, takes care of them, right? You have them multiple times mentioned. Use them. The only referent to them is the word cows. Cannot be cow. Please use pronouns if such a glaring error exists. I used pronouns, I used parallelism, and I used tenses, correct? Very simple, applying all the rules onto a question. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a last question, and then I'm going to spend some time taking some questions. Just to give you a sense, you guys have sent me 36 questions. Okay, it's humanly, it's not possible for anyone to answer. Sorry, 16 questions. So 16 questions is a lot. I will try my best to answer most of them, but we will do that after this sentence, because this SE question will explain how to read sentence structure. If you're able to understand sentence structure, this is, a question that will help you with that. All right. 2 minutes, time starts now. I see, let me see the results. So we see that we got a bunch of you with B and some of you with A, C, D, E. What I'm going to do is I'm just not going to spend too much time explaining what is right, wrong, okay? Let me just tell you, if you are able to get the construction of this particular question, I don't need to worry about your sentence construction, or rather your ability to find an error in sentence construction. So let's look at it. Let's see. What is the first subject? About 5 million acres in the United States. That is my subject. What happened to this? They have been invaded by leafy spurge. So what is the subject? About 5 million acres in the United States. What is the predicate or the verb? Have been invaded by leafy spurge. Now, someone asked me about a positive, right? A herbaceous plant from Eurasia with milky sap that gives mouth sores to cattle, comma, displacing grasses and other cattle food, and rendering rangeland worthless. Do all of you get a sense that there is some problem because the ending part, the appositive, a herbaceous plant from Eurasia with milky sap, that gives this, it just looks too complex, right? Like, what is displacing modifying here? It is something that is modifying the cattle's, or the fact that it gives mouth floors to source to cattle, correct? Can be very confusing. So I know there is a problem, but here is the thing. I'm going to look at something else, right? Before I get there. So let's look at answer option B. States have been invaded by leafy spurge. I keep saying spurge. This becomes my subject. Have been becomes my object. So this is my independent clause. A herbaceous plant from Eurasia. What is this? It is modifying leafy spurge. Okay. With milky sap. So what does it have? It has two things. One, he is describing leafy spurge, and he is using an appositive to describe that. He is saying a herbaceous plant from Eurasia. Now he is also telling me something else about this leafy spurge. He is telling that it has a milky sap. So let me give you an analogy. The mango tree, comma, native to India, comma, with a huge trunk. Now, with a huge trunk is not modifying India, correct? With a huge trunk is modifying mango tree. So what is mango tree? A tree native to India with a huge trunk. So that is the role of with milky sap over here. Did you understand? Okay, it's modifying leafy spurge. Okay. Now it says that, okay, that does two things. That A gives mouth sores to cattle, and B displaces grasses and other cattle food. So what does it do? It does two things. If I were to build on my mango tree example, the mango tree, okay, comma, a tree native to India, comma, with a huge trunk. Now I want to modify the mango tree that gives us tasty fruits and shelter from the sun. What does it do? It gives us two things. The first thing that it gives is that, now you remember this that is applying to leafy spurge. Said that again, spurge. Okay? And it does two things. It A gives mouth sores, and it B displaces grasses and other cattle food. Now it says, comma, rendering. You see this word rendering? What does word rendering do? It acts as a present participle modifier. And when you have a present participle modifier, ending a clause, it modifies what is given preceding. So it tells you that because it displaces grasses and other cattle food, and it gives mouth sores to cattle, because of this, what happens? As a result, it ends up making rangeland worthless. Correct? So, slightly complex sentence structure, but I'm just trying to give you an analogy. So maybe let me just try to give you an analogy. So I'll give you the same mango tree wala example, right? The mango tree, a tree that is, I'll just extend, a tree that is native to India, correct? With a huge trunk. So far, the analogy makes sense. Okay, that gives us fruits and protects us from the sun. Okay, comma. Okay. Now I have to, give something. So let me. Now, what am I doing? I'm ending it with providing a much needed shelter, correct? Which one? The fact that it protects us from the sun. What does that do? What is the effect? Providing a much needed shelter. See, I also want you to understand, and I also want you to appreciate, okay, one thing, which is who in your right mind, okay, be honest with me, who in your right mind would actually write a sentence like this? Like the one answer option B is saying, or like the mango tree one. Nobody, right? It's crazy. Nobody would write a sentence like that. And that's what GMAT does to you. So when you look at answer option B, right, it's not a sentence that anyone in his right mind would have actually written, correct? But because it is written in a very complex way, because, how many of you agree that if I were to use that lens of sounds right and sounds wrong, doesn't answer option B sounds wrong? It sounds wrong to me. I would never write like this. I would never speak like this, which is why I also want you to caution about using your judgment. That's what GMAT knows. GMAT knows about you. GMAT knows that you are a person who tends to go with your intuition, your gut feel. And what it does is it creates these traps, knowing very well that this is something that you may not like from an intuitive sense. So what I believe is GMAT is a test of both intellect and intuition. I'm not saying don't use intuition, don't use your IQ, don't use your intelligence, but at the same time, especially for sentence correction, put it under the lens of grammar, under the lens of logic, correct? And if it meets the requirements of logic and grammar, then pretty much there is no reason for us to eliminate the answer options. Okay. Now, very quickly, I'll tell you why D and D is wrong. D and D says having been invaded. By making it into a present participle, what happens is it lacks a verb, correct? Answer option A, B, C have a very clear verb, have been invaded, which make that into a independent clause, correct? I showed you with answer option A and B. C also is fine, right? But the problem is with answer option D and D, there is no verb. So be careful of sentence construction. And then answer option C over here, okay? If you see, just once again, sorry. If you see answer option C over here, answer option C says, have been invaded by leafy spurge, a herbaceous plant from Eurasia, having milky sap. Once again, having milky sap that gives mouth sores to cattle and displacing. Is displacing and having parallel, and is parallel to rendering, right? So here you see a parallelism problem, that having, displacing, rendering are not parallel to each other. Okay, so what I'm saying is The problem with answer option A is you see this small comma. Do you notice the comma over here? Look at just answer option A and B, correct? Now see, a herbaceous plant from Eurasia, is that put under two commas? That is your clue that that is the phrase, correct? Otherwise, the way to read it is herbaceous plant from Eurasia with milky sap. So kind of with milky sap cannot attach itself to Eurasia. Get it? Does it make sense? Yeah. All right. Excellent. So I again hope that we had a good session. Just one quick point I wanted to tell you that if you are in Bangalore, we plan to have something, maybe a small session where we can kind of do a face-to-face touch base. Also, even we are looking at improving the live sessions. So I would really want your feedback. So we spent about an hour and a half, hour, 40 minutes. So if you can just tell me what's been your feedback, is there anything that we can do to improve these live sessions? Because see, my intent is really the way I see it, and I've said this earlier also, that Arvind, we kind of have figured out what the GMAT is. Our intent is to basically pass it on. So in case there is something that we can do to make it better, right? Okay, so thanks all of you. You've been great. Thanks so much. And I hope you like this session. Please let me know if you have any feedback, any way we can help you improve the course. I'd be more than glad to do that. And I would also like you to help us by, if you found something good about what we have done so far, if you can go to GMAT Club, because as a smaller company, that's what we really rely on, right? We rely on our students being our brand ambassadors. So if you like what you saw, then please also let us know about it on GMAT Club. Yeah, thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon.